I never thought I would find myself here, sharing my story with strangers on the internet. But I guess sometimes you just need an outlet, a place to let it all out. My name is Jake, and I've been married to Lisa for 8 years. We've had our ups and downs, like any couple, but the past year was especially rough. It got to a point where we both agreed that we needed some time apart to figure things out. What I didn't know then was that this separation would change everything. It all started about a year ago. Lisa and I were constantly at each other's throats. Little things would set us off, and the fights were getting uglier and uglier. We were like two people living separate lives under the same roof. Our communication was terrible, and the intimacy that once glued us together was almost non-existent. One night, after another heated argument, Lisa suggested we take a break. "Maybe some time apart will help us see things more clearly," she said, her voice trembling with frustration and sadness. I was reluctant at first, but deep down, I knew she was right. We needed to step back and breathe. We agreed to separate for a few months, giving each other space to think about what we really wanted. Lisa moved in with her sister while I stayed in our house. It was a lonely and painful time for both of us. I missed her, but I also felt a strange sense of relief. The constant tension was gone, replaced by an eerie silence. During those months, I tried to focus on myself. I went to the gym, picked up old hobbies, and even started seeing a therapist. It was hard work, but I began to feel a little better, a little more like myself. I hoped Lisa was doing the same. We kept in touch, but our conversations were brief and awkward. Neither of us knew what to say. It was like we were walking on eggshells, afraid to say the wrong thing and ruin any chance of reconciliation. But after a while, we started to miss each other. Really miss each other. One night, after months of soul-searching, Lisa called me. "Jake, can we talk?" she asked, her voice softer than I remembered. We met at a quiet little cafe we used to love. Sitting across from each other, it felt like meeting someone new, yet so familiar. "I've missed you," she said, tears welling up in her eyes. "I've missed you too," I replied, reaching out to hold her hand. We talked for hours that night, sharing our thoughts, our fears, and our hopes for the future. We both admitted our mistakes and the things we needed to work on. It was a raw and honest conversation, one we should have had a long time ago. "I want to try again," Lisa said, her eyes pleading with mine. "I love you, Jake, and I believe we can make this work if we're both willing to fight for it." I felt the same way. Despite everything, my love for her hadn't faded. If anything, the time apart had made me realize how much she meant to me. "I want that too," I said, squeezing her hand. "Let's start fresh." We decided to move back in together and give our marriage another shot. It wasn't easy, but we were committed to making it work. We set boundaries, made time for each other, and sought counseling to help us navigate our issues. Things were slowly getting better. But then, a few weeks after we reunited, Lisa sat me down one evening. "Jake, there's something I need to tell you," she said, her voice shaking. "During our separation, I had a short affair." My heart stopped. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. "What?" I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. She looked down, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, it was a mistake and it meant nothing. But I needed to be honest with you." I was in shock. My mind raced and I felt a mixture of anger, betrayal, and hurt. "Who was it?" I asked, my voice trembling. "His name is Mark," she said, barely able to meet my eyes. "He's a colleague. It was brief, and it ended before we decided to get back together. I'm so sorry, Jake." I stood up, needing space to process what I had just heard. My head was spinning, and my heart was pounding in my chest. "I need some time to think," I said, walking out of the room. I spent the next few hours driving aimlessly, trying to make sense of it all. How could she do this to me? To us? I thought about all the times we had fought, the pain we had gone through, and now this? It felt like a cruel joke. Eventually, I found myself parked by the lake, a place we used to go to escape the world. I sat there staring at the water, replaying her words over and over in my mind. It was a lot to take in. But despite the anger and hurt, I knew I still loved her. I needed to understand why it happened, and if we could move past it. When I finally went back home, Lisa was sitting on the couch, her face buried in her hands. She looked up when I walked in, her eyes red and swollen. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I never wanted to hurt you." I sat down across from her, taking a deep breath. "Why, Lisa, why did you do it?" She sighed, wiping away her tears. "I was lost, Jake. I felt so alone and confused. Mark was there, and it just happened. It was a mistake, and I regret it more than anything." We talked for hours, dissecting every detail, every emotion. It was painful, but it was necessary. I needed to understand if there was any way we could move forward. By the end of the night, I felt a glimmer of hope. It was going to be a long and difficult journey, but I believed we could get through it. We had to. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions. Lisa and I navigated through an ocean of hurt and mistrust, trying to make sense of the tangled web of our past and present. Every conversation felt like walking on a tightrope, balancing between our desire to rebuild and the pain that constantly threatened to tear us apart. I couldn't stop thinking about her affair. Mark. The name echoed in my mind like a bitter refrain. I knew I had to get more details, even though I dreaded hearing them. One evening, after a particularly strained day at work, I decided it was time to address it head-on. "Lisa, we need to talk," I said as I walked into the living room where she was curled up with a book. She looked up, her eyes apprehensive. "I know," she replied softly, closing the book and setting it aside. "Let's sit down." We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the same table where we had shared countless meals and conversations. But this time, the air was thick with tension. "I need to understand what happened," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need to know everything." Lisa nodded, her eyes filled with sorrow. "I understand. I'll tell you everything." She took a deep breath and began to recount the story. "It started a few weeks after we separated. I was feeling so lonely and lost. I spent most of my time at my sister's, but it didn't help. I missed you, and I didn't know how to cope with the emptiness. I listened, my heart heavy with each word. "And Mark?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Mark was just a colleague at first. We worked on a few projects together, and he seemed nice. One evening, a group of us went out for drinks after work. I was feeling particularly down that day, and I guess I just wanted to forget about everything for a while." She paused, her eyes searching mine for understanding. We ended up talking a lot that night. He was going through a divorce, and we bonded over our mutual pain. One thing led to another, and we started seeing each other more often. It felt nice to have someone to talk to, someone who understood what I was going through. My stomach churned as I imagined them together. "Did you?" I couldn't bring myself to finish the sentence. "Yes," she admitted, tears welling up in her eyes again. "It happened a few times. But I ended it before we decided to get back together. I knew it was wrong, and I couldn't live with the guilt. It was never about love or a future with him. It was a mistake, Jake. A terrible mistake." I sat there, processing her words. It felt like a punch to the gut, knowing she had found solace in someone else's arms while I was struggling to keep myself together. But I also understood the desperation and loneliness that had driven her to it. I had felt it too. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked, my voice breaking. "I was scared," she admitted. "Scared of losing you, scared of destroying any chance we had of rebuilding our marriage. But I couldn't keep it from you, not if we were going to move forward. You deserve to know the truth." Her honesty cut deep, but it also gave me a strange sense of relief. At least now I knew the full extent of what had happened. There were no more secrets between us, but knowing didn't make it any easier. "Jake, I love you," Lisa said, reaching out to touch my hand. "I never stopped loving you, even when things were at their worst. I know I hurt you, and I'm so sorry. I want to make this work. I want us to be happy again." I looked at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. Despite everything, I still loved her too. But trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. "It's going to take time," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how or when, but if we're both willing to try, Maybe we can get through this." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Over the next few weeks, we continued our painful but necessary conversations. We attended counseling sessions together, trying to untangle the mess of our emotions and find a way forward. There were days when it felt like we were making progress, and others when the weight of the betrayal was almost too much to bear. One evening, after a particularly intense session with our counselor, we sat in the car, both of us drained. "I hate this," I admitted, staring out the window. "I hate feeling like this." "I know," Lisa replied, her voice barely audible. "But I believe we can get through it. I have to believe that." We drove home in silence, the tension hanging between us like a thick fog. Once inside, I headed to the kitchen to grab a drink. Lisa followed, and we stood there facing each other. "Jake, I want to show you something," she said, her voice trembling. "What is it?" I asked, wary of what she might reveal. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small journal. "I've been writing in this since we got back together. It's everything I'm feeling, everything I'm struggling with. I want you to read it." I took the journal from her, my hands shaking. "Why?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Because I want you to see that I'm committed to us," she said, tears filling her eyes. "I want you to understand how much I regret what happened and how much I love you." That night, I sat down and read her journal, page after page. Her words painted a picture of a woman tormented by guilt and sorrow, but also filled with hope and determination. It was a raw and honest account of her journey, and it touched me deeply. As I closed the journal, I realized that healing was possible, but it would require patience, understanding, and a lot of hard work. We had a long road ahead of us, but for the first time in a while, I felt a glimmer of hope. The morning after reading Lisa's journal, I woke up with a heavy heart, but also with a renewed sense of determination. I knew that if we were going to move forward, we needed to confront not just the affair, but also the deeper issues in our relationship. It was time to lay everything out on the table. "Lisa, we need to talk," I said over breakfast, my voice steady but firm. She looked up from her coffee, her eyes filled with apprehension. "Okay," she replied softly, setting her mug down. We moved to the living room, sitting on opposite ends of the couch. The distance between us felt symbolic of the emotional gap we were trying to bridge. I took a deep breath and began. "I read your journal last night," I said. "It was a lot to take in. But it also made me realize that we can't just brush this under the rug. We need to face everything head on." Lisa nodded, her expression a mix of fear and determination. "I agree. I'm ready to talk about anything you need to." "First, I need to understand why," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "Why did you feel so alone that you turned to someone else?" She sighed, tears welling up in her eyes. "Jake, our marriage was falling apart. We were barely speaking, and when we did, it was only to fight. I felt like I was losing you, and it terrified me. I didn't know how to reach you, how to fix what was broken." I nodded, trying to keep my own emotions in check. "I felt the same way, Lisa. But instead of talking to me, you turned to someone else. That hurts more than I can put into words." "I know," she said, her voice trembling. "I was weak and scared. I didn't know how to cope. Mark was there, and I made a terrible mistake. It wasn't about him. It was about trying to fill the void I felt inside." Her words cut deep, but I knew she was being honest. It was a painful truth, but it was a step towards healing. "We both made mistakes," I admitted. "I withdrew from you, buried myself in work, and avoided the problems in our marriage. I should have fought harder for us." Lisa reached out and took my hand, her touch warm and reassuring. "We're both to blame for what happened. But we have a chance to start over, to rebuild what we lost. I believe we can do it if we're both willing to put in the work." I squeezed her hand, feeling a flicker of hope. "I want to try, Lisa, but it's going to take time. Trust doesn't come back overnight." "I understand," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes." We spent the next few hours talking about our past, our fears, and our hopes for the future. It was an intense and emotional conversation, but it felt like a breakthrough. For the first time in a long while, we were truly communicating. As the weeks went by, we continued to face our issues head-on. We attended counseling sessions together and separately, working through the pain and mistrust. It wasn't easy, and there were days when I felt like giving up. But each time, I reminded myself of the love we once had and the future we could still build. One evening, after a particularly grueling therapy session, Lisa and I sat on the porch, watching the sunset. "Jake, I know it's been hard, but I feel like we're making progress," she said, her voice filled with a mix of hope and exhaustion. "I think so too," I replied, taking her hand in mine. "It's not going to be easy, but I believe we can get through this." She leaned her head on my shoulder, and for the first time in months I felt a sense of peace. We were far from perfect, and there was still a lot of work to be done, but we were moving in the right direction. One day, as I was leaving for work, I ran into Mark. He was walking into a nearby building, and our eyes met briefly. My heart raced, a mix of anger and curiosity surging through me. I knew I needed to confront him, to understand his side of the story. "Mark," I called out, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. He turned, surprise flashing across his face. "Jake, I didn't expect to see you here." "We need to talk," I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. He nodded, seemingly resigned to the conversation. We walked to a nearby park, finding a quiet spot away from prying eyes. "I know about you and Lisa," I began, my voice tight with barely controlled anger. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. I figured, "Look, Jake, I'm sorry. It was never my intention to hurt anyone." "Then why?" I demanded, my fists clenched at my sides. "Why did you do it?" "Honestly, I was in a bad place too," he admitted. My marriage was falling apart, and I was looking for anything to distract me from the pain. Lisa and I just connected. It was a mistake, and I regret it. His words echoed Lisa's, and though it didn't make the betrayal any easier to swallow, it helped to hear his side. "Do you have any feelings for her?" I asked, needing to know if there was any lingering threat. "No," he said firmly. "It was never about love or a future. It was a moment of weakness for both of us. I'm truly sorry, Jake." I studied his face, searching for any hint of deceit, but all I saw was regret and sincerity. It didn't erase the pain, but it was something. "I appreciate your honesty," I said finally, "but know this. If you ever come near my wife again, there will be consequences." He nodded, understanding the gravity of my words. "I understand, and again, I'm sorry." With that, I turned and walked away, feeling a strange sense of closure. It didn't make everything right, but it was a step towards healing. Confronting Mark had been a necessary part of the process, and now I could focus on moving forward with Lisa. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Lisa and I continued to rebuild our relationship. It was a slow and painful journey, but with each passing day we grew stronger. We learned to communicate better, to be more patient and understanding with each other. The scars of the past were still there, but they were beginning to fade. One evening as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Lisa turned to me with a smile. "Jake, I think we're going to be okay." I looked at her, seeing the woman I fell in love with all those years ago. "I think so too," I replied, pulling her into a hug. "I love you, Lisa." "I love you too," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. In that moment, I knew that no matter what the future held, we would face it together. We had been through hell and back, but we were still standing. Our love had been tested, and though it had been scarred, it had emerged stronger, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. The road to recovery was far from smooth. Despite our efforts to rebuild our relationship, the emotional impact of Lisa's affair lingered like a dark cloud over us. Every day was a struggle, and every small victory felt like a monument. One night, a few months after the confrontation with Mark, I found myself lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. Lisa was asleep beside me, her breathing soft and even. I couldn't sleep. The thoughts in my mind were too. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake her, and went to the kitchen. I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the table, the silence of the house pressing in on me. As much as I wanted to move on, There were moments when the betrayal felt fresh. The next day, during our counseling session, I brought up my sleepless night. "I can't stop thinking about it," I admitted, my voice heavy with frustration. "Even when things are good, it's like a shadow that I can't escape." Our counselor, Dr. Thompson, nodded sympathetically. "Jake, it's completely normal to feel this way. Healing from infidelity takes time, and there will be setbacks. What's important is how you both handle these moments." Lisa looked at me, her eyes filled with guilt and concern. "Jake, I'm so sorry that you're still hurting. I wish I could take it all back." "I know," I said, reaching out to hold her hand. "And I'm trying to move past it, but it's hard." Dr. Thompson leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. "Let's talk about what you both can do when these feelings arise. Communication is key. Jake, when you feel overwhelmed, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with Lisa, and Lisa, be patient and supportive. Rebuilding trust takes consistent effort from both sides." We left the session with a renewed sense of purpose, but the journey ahead was still daunting. That night, as we prepared for bed, I took Dr. Thompson's advice to heart. "Lisa," I said, turning to her, "there are still nights when I can't sleep because of everything that happened. It's hard to shake off the images and the feelings." She looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. "Jake, I hate that I've caused you so much pain. I'm here for you, and I'll do whatever it takes to help you through this." I nodded, grateful for her support but still grappling with the weight of my emotions. "I just need you to understand that it's not something I can just get over. It's going to take time." "I know," she said softly, taking my hand in hers. "And I'm not going anywhere. We'll get through this together." As the months passed, we worked hard to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. There were days when the pain felt manageable, and other days when it threatened to consume me. But through it all, we held on to each other, determined to find our way back to the love we once knew. One particularly challenging day, I decided to take a walk to clear my head. I ended up at the park where I had confronted Mark. Sitting on a bench, I watched as families played and couples strolled by, their laughter and joy a stark contrast to the turmoil in my heart. "Mind if I join you?" a familiar voice asked. I looked up to see my friend Matt standing there with a concerned look on his face. "Sure," I replied, gesturing for him to sit. Matt and I had been friends since college, and he had been a pillar of support throughout the separation and the aftermath of Lisa's confession. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his voice filled with genuine concern. I sighed, rubbing my temples. "Some days are better than others. It's just hard, trying to move on but feeling stuck in the past." He nodded, his expression sympathetic. "I can't imagine what you're going through, but I'm here for you. Have you thought about doing something to take your mind off things, like a hobby or a project?" I shrugged. "I've been trying, but it's hard to focus on anything else." Matt leaned back on the bench, his eyes thoughtful. "Maybe it's time to focus on something that makes you happy, something that's just for you. It might help to have an outlet, a way to channel all these emotions." His words struck a chord with me. I had been so consumed by the pain and the effort to rebuild my marriage that I had neglected my own needs. "You might be right," I said slowly. "I used to love painting. Maybe I should pick it up again." Matt smiled. "That sounds like a great idea. Give it a try. And remember, you don't have to go through this alone. Lean on your friends and family. We're here for you." That evening, I went home and dug out my old painting supplies. Setting up a small studio in the spare room, I began to paint again. It was therapeutic, a way to express the emotions I couldn't put into words. Lisa was supportive, giving me the space I needed while also being there when I needed to talk. One night, as I was working on a particularly intense piece, Lisa walked in. She stood quietly for a moment, watching me. "Jake, your paintings are incredible," she said softly. I looked at her, seeing the genuine admiration in her eyes. "Thanks," I replied, feeling a warmth spread through me. "It's been good for me to have this outlet." "I'm glad," she said, coming over to stand beside me. "I've been thinking a lot too. I want to do something to show you how committed I am to making things right." "What do you mean?" I asked, curious. "I've been looking into volunteering at a local shelter," she explained. "I want to give back, to do something positive. I thought maybe we could do it together as a way to heal and grow." Her suggestion took me by surprise, but it also made sense. Giving back, finding a purpose outside of our own struggles, could be a way to reconnect and find new meaning in our lives. "I'd like that," I said, feeling a flicker of hope. The following weekend, we started volunteering at the shelter. It was a humbling experience, seeing people who were going through their own hardships and struggles. It put our problems into perspective and reminded us of the importance of compassion and kindness. As we worked side by side, helping those in need, we began to heal in ways we hadn't anticipated. The shared experience brought us closer, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of purpose and connection. One evening, after a long day at the shelter, we sat together on the porch, enjoying the quiet of the night. "Thank you, Lisa," I said, breaking the silence. "This has been really good for us." She smiled, her eyes reflecting the light of the stars. "I'm glad. I feel like we're finally finding our way back to each other." I nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "We are, and I'm starting to believe that we can get through this, one step at a time." The emotional impact of the affair would always be a part of our story, but it didn't have to define us. We were learning to navigate the pain and find new ways to connect and grow. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. As we sat there holding hands and looking out at the world, I realized that the journey was far from over. But for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of hope and possibility. We were healing, and we were doing it together. The following months were a testament to our commitment to each other and to rebuilding our marriage. We continued our counseling sessions, worked on our individual growth, and found solace in our shared activities, like volunteering at the shelter and painting. But despite the progress, there was an underlying question that needed to be addressed. Could we truly move past Lisa's affair and build a future together? One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Lisa turned to me with a serious expression. "Jake, there's something I've been thinking about," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "What is it?" I asked, feeling a knot form in my stomach. "I think we need to make a decision about our future," she said softly. "We've been working so hard to rebuild, but we haven't really talked about what comes next. Do you think we can truly move past this and be happy together?" Her question hung in the air, heavy with the weight of our shared experiences. I took a deep breath, trying to gather my thoughts. "I've been thinking about that too," I admitted. "I want to believe that we can. But it's not just about wanting it. It's about making the choice every day to move forward and not let the past define us." Lisa nodded, her eyes searching mine. "I know it's not going to be easy, but I believe in us. I believe that we can get through this if we're both willing to keep fighting for our marriage." "I believe in us too," I said, feeling a surge of determination. "But we need to be honest with ourselves and each other. Are we truly ready to commit to this, to let go of the past and focus on the future?" Lisa took my hand, her grip firm and reassuring. "I'm ready, Jake. I want to build a future with you. I know I made a terrible mistake, but I've learned from it. I've grown, and I'm more committed to us than ever." Her words resonated with me. We had both been through so much, and the fact that we were still standing, still fighting, was a testament to our strength and resilience. "I'm ready too," I said, feeling a sense of clarity. "I want to move forward, to build a future together. But we need to set some boundaries and continue to work on our communication." Lisa smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "I agree. Let's make a plan, set some goals, and keep each other accountable. We can do this, Jake. I know we can." The next few weeks were filled with planning and goal setting. We talked about our dreams, our fears, and our expectations for the future. We set boundaries to ensure that we maintained open and honest communication and committed to regular check-ins to discuss our progress and any concerns. One evening, as we were going through our goals, Lisa turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Jake, there's one more thing I think we should do," she said. What's that? I asked, curious. I think we should renew our vows, she said, her voice filled with emotion. Not just as a symbolic gesture, but as a real commitment to each other and our future, to show that we're choosing each other despite everything. The idea struck a chord with me. Renewing our vows would be a powerful way to affirm our commitment and start fresh. I love that idea, I said, feeling a sense of excitement. Let's do it. We began planning a small, intimate ceremony with just our closest friends and family. It wasn't about the pomp and circumstance, it was about the meaning behind the vows. As the day approached, I felt a mix of nerves and excitement. It was a chance to start over, to solidify our commitment to each other and our future. On the day of the ceremony, we stood in a small garden, surrounded by the people who had supported us through our journey. As I looked into Lisa's eyes, I saw a reflection of my own emotions: love, determination, and hope. Jake, she began, her voice steady and filled with emotion, I stand here today to reaffirm my love and commitment to you. We've been through so much, and I know I hurt you deeply. But through it all, my love for you has never wavered. I promise to continue to work on our marriage, to be honest, and to always choose you. I love you, and I believe in us. Tears filled my eyes as I listened to her words. Taking a deep breath, I began my own vows. Lisa, standing here with you today, I'm reminded of the love that brought us together and the strength that has kept us going. We've faced incredible challenges, but we've also found our way back to each other. I promise to continue to work on our marriage, to be patient, and to always communicate openly. I love you, and I'm committed to building a future together. As we exchanged rings and sealed our vows with a kiss, I felt a profound sense of peace and hope. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but we were ready to face them together. After the ceremony, as we celebrated with our friends and family, I took a moment to reflect on our journey. We had come a long way from the pain and betrayal of the past. Through hard work, determination, and a lot of love, we had found our way back to each other. That night, as we lay in bed, Lisa turned to me with a smile. We did it, she said softly. We made it through. We did, I replied, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. And I'm so glad we did. I love you, Jake, she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. I love you too, Lisa, I replied, pulling her close. And I'm excited for our future. As we held each other, I knew that the journey was far from over. There would still be challenges, and there would still be moments of doubt and pain. But for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of hope and possibility. We had faced the darkness together and come out stronger on the other side. And no matter what the future held, I knew that we would face it together, hand in hand, ready to build the life and love we both deserved. The months following our vow renewal marked a new chapter in our lives. The healing process was ongoing, but with each passing day, Lisa and I felt more connected and hopeful about our future. Our efforts to rebuild trust and communication were paying off, and we were beginning to see the fruits of our labor in our everyday interactions. One evening, after a particularly peaceful day, Lisa and I sat on the porch, enjoying the tranquility of the setting sun. Jake, there's something I've been wanting to talk to you about, she said, her voice soft but resolute. I turned to her, sensing the seriousness in her tone. What is it, Lisa? She took a deep breath, her eyes searching mine. I've been thinking a lot about our future and what it might look like, and I keep coming back to the idea of starting a family. Her words caught me off guard, but in a good way. We had been so focused on repairing our marriage that the thought of expanding our family hadn't crossed my mind. Are you sure? I asked, wanting to make sure she felt ready. I am, she replied, her eyes brimming with hope. I know we've been through a lot, but I believe we're stronger now, and I think having a child could bring us even closer. I smiled, feeling a wave of emotion wash over me. I think you're right. Let's do it. The decision to start a family brought a new sense of purpose and excitement into our lives. We approached it with the same dedication and teamwork that had guided us through our healing process. A few months later, we found out that Lisa was pregnant, and the joy we felt was indescribable. The months of pregnancy were filled with anticipation and preparation. We attended prenatal classes together, decorated the nursery, and spent countless hours talking about our hopes and dreams for our child. It was a beautiful time, and it strengthened our bond even further. On a crisp autumn morning, our daughter, Emily, was born. Holding her for the first time was a moment of pure magic. As I looked into her tiny, innocent eyes, I felt an overwhelming surge of love and gratitude. This little person was a symbol of our journey, our struggles, and our triumphs. Life with a newborn was challenging, but it was also incredibly rewarding. Emily brought a new kind of joy into our home, a joy that made all the pain and hardship we had endured feel worth it. We navigated sleepless nights and endless diaper changes, but we did it together, as a team. One evening, a few months after Emily's birth, Lisa and I sat on the porch watching her sleep in her crib through the baby monitor. "She's perfect," Lisa whispered, her eyes filled with love. "She really is," I agreed, wrapping my arm around her. "And so are you, Lisa. We've come so far." She leaned into me, a contented smile on her face. "We have. And I wouldn't trade any of it for the world, not even the hard parts. They brought us here." As we sat there basking in the warmth of our love and the quiet of the night, I realized that our journey had come full circle. We had faced incredible challenges, but we had emerged stronger and more united. Emily was a testament to our resilience and our commitment to each other. Our lives continued to evolve, filled with the joys and challenges of parenthood. We watched Emily grow, took delight in her milestones, and cherished every moment together as a family. Our love for each other deepened with each passing day, and our home was filled with laughter and warmth. Reflecting on our journey, I knew that the pain and heartache we had endured were not in vain. They had forged a bond between us that was unbreakable, a bond that would guide us through whatever the future held. As long as we had each other, and now our beautiful daughter, we could face anything. And so our story continued, not defined by the mistakes of the past, but by the love and hope we had found in each other. We were a family, and that was more than I could have ever dreamed of.